Alrighty, welcome back, boys and girls. It's your main mathematician coming to you live from Summit Academy. In this video, we're working on that Unit 2 lesson number 3 now. And so we've been talking about x-intercepts, zeros, solutions, or roots. And so as a quick reminder, it says, what are the x-intercepts of this graph? And just as a recall to previous lessons, we said let's say the x-intercepts, let's say solutions, roots, or zeros. Again, any of those words are interchangeable. You can say that's where the graph hits the x-axis. And so let's kind of trace along our function. Again, you can click and kind of drag and see where it's at, but also too on Desmos, you can kind of just click exactly those points. You'll know that they will be the x-intercepts because it's where the y value is equal to 0. And so we can say it's going to be at the point x equals -3 and x equals 2. So let's write that. So let's say the x-intercepts are at, let's say, x equals -3 and x equals +2. And make sure you're hitting that blue button and make sure you're signed in so that way you can save your work. All right. So the next part, just recapping what we're trying to do. So our objective is we'll be able to create equations using x-intercepts of quadratic equations and describe their meaning on the graph. And some sentence starters for you would be the function blank has x-intercepts at blank. Sorry, it says, remember, an x-intercept is where the curve crosses the x-axis. So it says we can drag the black dots, and again, we can kind of move these around, and once the word correct appears, you will know your answer. So make sure you can pause the video, kind of try to drag where the x-intercepts are for this function. Alright, so now in the next part, it says, remember, the factored form of a quadratic can represent the x-intercepts on a graph. So for example, if you're looking at the equation y equals x plus 2 and x minus 7, so again, we're multiplying those because we have those set in parentheses. So it's x plus 2 times x minus 7. Make sure you're taking the opposites of those values. So an easy way to remember that is, again, just take the opposite of whatever your x value is, and on the graph it will be at the point x equals -2 and x equals 7. A way you can always check is using that Desmos calculator. So copy and paste that equation in. So let me copy that in. Again, looking on your graph. Let me make sure it's on here. It's actually, let me pull it up on this one real quick. There we go. So we're looking at this equation, and notice how it has those 2 points. And so we're saying at the points of -2 and +7 is where we're going to be at. All right. So now on the next part, it says here's the graph for that exact equation. You can notice how it has those points, so exactly like I just showed you. Again, you can click on those direct points. Be mindful, again, it's where it hits the x-axis, it's where y equals 0. Be mindful how it's different from the y-intercept, which is where it hits the y-axis. So we're looking at, key points or key parts of our graph. So in the first example, it says, what could be the equation shown on the left? So anytime you have the equation, make sure you can graph it out. Again, use those x-intercepts. And so, for example, I can say, well, it hits the point 3 and 8, but I need to take the opposites of those values in my equation. So I have to have -3 and -8 in my equation. Again, check your response, and it's good. So try these examples out. So I'm trying to use those x-intercepts to check your equation. Example 2, 3 are just like that. And for number 4, it says change the numbers in your equation. So now we're going from the from the graph to the equation, we're trying to figure out, okay, what should our equation be? So for example, if we say I need to change the numbers 5 and 9 in my equation to change it so it matches up with those x-intercepts. So instead of 5 and 9, I should have 1 and 4. Okay, you can check your answer. Notice how when I click check your answer, it graphs it out. Since it goes through those points and it hits the x-axis at those points, I know I'm good. So try the same thing out with this equation. Try changing your values in your equation so that way it goes through these points. Again, make sure you hit that check your answer button after it. Again, make sure you're not moving to the next slide until you make sure you have those correct x values. Once you get that, same or similar situation for number 6. It says, let's see if you can write that equation in factored form. So again, it's going to use that form of y equals x minus s and x minus t, and you're trying to change those numbers s and t so that way they go through those points. Again, make sure you can use the check your answer button. So again, I'm going to be typing it like this. I'm going to say I have x minus s and x minus t. I'm going to be changing the values so that way they go through those points. On number 7, it says, what if you're given the equation? Can you determine what the x-intercepts are? And we certainly can. So let's say if our equation is f of x equals x minus 1 and x plus 8, what should those x-intercepts be and how do we know? So we can say the x-intercepts will be at x equals positive 1 and x equals negative 8. We know this because when we plug in either of those values at those points, our y value is equal to 0. So it should always, have those values when you plug them in. It should, one of those sets of parentheses will equal 0, which means the entire right side will equal 0. So you're going to make sure you're hitting that blue button, that way it's saved in there. And for the last one, it says write an equation. Using the table to the right, or to the left it should say, write an equation either using the x-intercept form. So again, we can kind of use and have these tables, and I notice, hey, I can check some of these points, that way I plug it in, but mainly too, if I look at these points, I notice, hey, it's wherever y equals 0. So I can say the equation for this function will be in the form, and let me write it like this. So let's say, I click this button, let's say f of x equals, I know that these points are going to be my x-intercepts because it's where y equals 0. So I have to take the opposite of value for my equation. So I have x plus 2, and I'm going to have x minus 1. So again, make sure you can have those out for yourself. Be sure to ask questions as needed, and it does, as always, super slam that subscribe button.